Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video we are going to discuss more about environmental biotechnology. So let's get started. So in this video we are going to start off with water cycle. So moving on with that. So there are some of the key terms that are involved in a water cycle or a hydrological cycle, as you can see on the screen. So these three terms are reservoirs, assimilation and release. So reservoirs are oceans, airs, groundwaters, lakes and glaciers. Assimilation is the absorption of water or any other nutrients by the plants or animals consuming water or any sort of nutrients from the available surfaces. And this is third term is the release, which is through plants or maybe through animals, which can be through transpiration, respiration or evaporation. All right, and it involves continuous circulation of water in the earth atmosphere. Some of the key terms here we have is the evaporation, respiration, transpiration, condensation, precipitation and runoffs. So this is a basic picture of a water cycle, as you can see on your screen. So this is the source, and this water gets evaporated normally, and through plants it gets transpired or transpiration takes place, and through animals or humans it gets released through respiration, and thus it condenses up, and in the form of rain or snow depending on the climate it precipitates down. So definitely it maintains a very good cycle throughout to maintain a proper balance. Moving on with this, so let us discuss some of the human impacts on hydrological cycle. So the first point it says that it degrades water quality by adding nutrients such as nitrates, nitrites and phosphates and destroying wetlands. The second point which is it degrades water clarity by clearing vegetations and increasing soil erosion. And the third point is the water withdrawal from streams, lakes and groundwater. So which is due to salt water intrusions and groundwater depletion. Also, the fourth point we say is that the clearing of vegetation from land for agriculture, mining, road and building constructions. So these are some of the points that are on the lower side, or some of the negative points that affects us, or as humans it affects us due to the water cycle. So moving on to this, so this is a picture that I've got for you. Again, a picture, a very important, interesting picture. That is this is the source, and this source gets evaporated due to the sun or any other factor, and through respiration in plants, better respiration through these organisms, pardon, and transpiration from plants. So all of these plants goes up, gets condensed, and in the form of precipitation through rain or snow it gets down. So this is a way it fulfills the water cycle. Moving on with this, the next cycle that we have here is the carbon cycle. So we'll discuss about the carbon cycle next time. So talking about the carbon cycle, let us discuss about some of the important information that we have under carbon cycle. So the carbon cycle or the carbon pool consists of these many important substances, which are the atmosphere, definitely the terrestrial planets, soil organic matter, ocean, fossil fuel deposits and marine sediments and sedimentary rocks. So basically it combines everything that exists on earth. Also, the carbon is stored in our planet in the following major pools. So it can be stored as reduced organic molecules. So it can be stored as reduced organic molecules in the form of carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acid, lipids and other molecules in all living dead organisms found in biosphere. It is also stored in the form of oxidized. It is stored in the form of oxidized, such as CO2 in the atmosphere. So CO2 is definitely present as raw in the atmosphere. So it is present in oxidized form. The third point that we have is in the lithosphere, such as fossil fuels and sedimentary rocks, deposits such as limestone, dolomite and chalk. Also, the oceans are dissolved atmospheric carbon dioxide and calcium carbonate cells in marine organisms. Also, the biggest source of carbon is the oceans and the sedimentary rocks. Alright, so ocean lies definitely is the biggest source of carbon, and it is present as you can see, the calcium carbonate shells and many other forms. So moving on with, so talking about more about carbon cycle that we have here is the carbon is an essential nutrient or component of living system or living things. The carbon continuously moves through an ecosystem in a cyclic manner called the carbon cycle, and the carbon found in air as CO2 is about 0.04% of the atmosphere. So that if we say is less amount, but it is still though it's a big amount. Also, autotrophs like plants use sunlight and CO2 from the atmosphere to make food by photosynthesis. So definitely it's beneficial for plants but not for humans. And this is the basic formula that we have been learning from our junior classes. So this is taking of CO2, water and energy to give oxygen and glucose. So the carbon becomes part of the plant stored food, which is in the form of stored food. Yeah. Also, we have next term is the heterotrophs, which obtain glucose by eating plants and break it down in cellular respiration to obtain energy, thereby releasing CO2 back to the atmosphere. So definitely heterotrophs are organisms which are dependent on food and basically which depend on chemical substances for fulfilling their requirement. So these obtain glucose and other nutrients by eating plants and breaking down in cellular respiration to obtain energy, releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. Moving on with this, so this is the basic formula that we have here again. And chemoautotrophs also assimilate some parts of the carbon taken from plants into their own body. So a small amount of carbon also do get absorbed into their bodies. And when plants and animals die, most of their bodies are decomposed and carbon atoms are returned to the atmosphere by decomposers. So definitely when even an animal or a human or a plant dies, so all of the carbon that is stored or assimilated inside the body gets returned to the atmosphere with the help of decomposers. And some are not decomposed fully, definitely, and ends up in the deposits at the ocean floor and fossils, which are the oil, coal and etc. So these take a lot of time to get decomposed. So these are mainly stored in the form of ocean floor and fossils. Also, carbon in rocks and underground deposits such as limestone, CaCO2 is released very slowly into the atmosphere. Yes, definitely it's a very slow process, and it takes millions of years for its completion. Also, oceans contain Earth's largest store of carbon. Yes, as I mentioned, that ocean is the largest carbon source, and also fossil fuels and marine sediments are another biggest source of carbon. So moving on with this, so here we have the carbon cycle, as you can see. So these are the woods and fossil fuels. So after burning, these go up, releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, and after CO2 is released into the atmosphere, these may go to plants and algae or any other plant organisms, which they use it for their purpose in the process of photosynthesis, or it may go to the sea or the ocean beds, all right, which are used by the marine organisms, and thus they are decomposed there. And after such, if you follow this path, so these carbon are used by these plants, and these plants make food and release oxygen, all right. And after these are transferred to the plants, cause animals feed on plants. So after animals have feed it on plants, so these the carbon that they have absorbed, or whenever they die, all of the carbon sources goes down or gets decomposed with the help of dead materials. And also the amount of they respire, or all the human or animals, whatever they respire in the form of oxygen, in the form of carbon dioxide, goes up into the atmosphere. All right, so this is a very simple process which I'll be explaining you again. I hope that is pretty much a little complex, but this is very simple. So let's just start from here. So in a wood and fossil, so this is a factory, right? So all of the emission, CO2 emission goes up into the atmosphere. So the CO2 present in the atmosphere may follow two paths. So one is it may be absorbed by the plants here, or it may move to the ocean beds and thus get decomposed there, or thus may be present there. All right. So if the carbon dioxide is taken by plants, so after consumption of CO2 by plants, they carry out the process of photosynthesis, in which they release oxygen as well as glucose also. So these plants carry out their own process, and definitely these plants are fed by, these plants are dependent on CO2 for their photosynthesis. Also, these animals feed on plants, right, for their satisfying of their hunger. All right, for satisfying their hunger, they feed on plants. Thus, they release CO2 as they respire CO2, and their CO2 also gets deposited into the atmosphere. And after their death, these are decomposed with the help of decomposers, and these carbons are returned back to the atmosphere. Alright, and this goes with the same with the soil and microbes, which act as decomposers and return all of the dead decaying material which has carbon in it to the atmosphere back. Alright, so with this. So coming to the last part of the video, which is the exchange of carbon among three reservoirs or storage places, which are the land, the ocean, and the atmosphere. So these three are important reservoirs for carbon storage, which can be land, which can be oceans, which can be atmosphere. So the process that transfers carbon between two earth systems, which can be photosynthesis, respiration, consumption, decomposition, combustion. So definitely all of these processes release CO2. All right, and definitely respiration involves release of CO2, decomposition, combustion, all involving release of CO2. Also, where in case of photosynthesis, so the photosynthesis requires CO2 and releases oxygen, and these oxygen are used by all of the living humans and all of the animals which respire CO2. All right, so they take in oxygen release from photosynthesis. So they take in oxygen released from photosynthesis, and thus they respire CO2 into the atmosphere. Alright, so this is how the CO2 transfer takes place. Definitely CO2 is involved in the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis releases O2, and this O2 is taken by humans and animals, and thus they respire CO2. So this is how the transfer of carbon takes place, whereas in all of the processes is same. Alright, so let us keep this video till here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching this video.